Hello, my darlings, and welcome back to Radio Wasteland. I actually had a list of taglines that I've been trying to work on here, but
you're listening. All of them right
now.
No,
I'm trying to work on it. I've been collecting some stuff, but let me tell you this first. You're listening to Radio Wasteland. This is a show about the paranormal and the conspiracy and UFOs and all that, and I'm your host, Chauncey Hallworth, and this is my co-host, Sean. How are you doing?
Hello. Good.
How's your week going?
Pretty uneventful here. I've really not been doing much, almost at all. Finally got out of a hotel room in a rental area with my parents, and having my own room has apparently just destroyed any semblance of motivation I had to go out and do anything with my life, so I've just been, sleeping all week.
Well, I gotta say, living in hotel rooms is, not very motivating. It's
it motivates you to get anywhere but here, anywhere else in the world.
Yeah. So where are you staying now? Friends, or did you rent something? Or?
No, I'm currently living with my parents in the house that they rented before I go out and do something else.
Right, so they rented something. So
yes,
that's how you got out of a hotel,
Yes.
Right. So are you suburban?
We're actually in the same exact neighborhood as... So, yes. We're in the same neighborhood where the house that burned down is.
Really?
So we're right down the street from
You're down the street from your burned down house. Huh.
Which is pretty odd.
Have you ever seen the movie Grosse Pointe Blank?
I have not.
Well, he leaves town and he ends up coming back, and he goes back to his old house because he wants to, he's been gone for a decade, and he's just all, okay, well, I got to go back to my old house. And he, pulls up, and it's now a 7-Eleven. And he's just all... Well, apparently you can't go home, but apparently you can shop there. It's and so to live down the street from your burned down house, man, I'm not sure that's good for your parents.
Yeah, I don't know what the thinking on that particular choice was, to be honest. But hey, the whole neighborhood is just mauled by fire. It just, there's this hill here, and it looks like it's been fighting with all the other hills. There's just patches of trees torn out of it. And
it's interesting to watch what humanity is capable of. So here we are with these amazing people going and fighting, and people fighting the fire, and people teaming up and helping one another. And then on my way here today, there's this neighbor of mine, and he does this every day. I'm constantly looking out the window and seeing him. He's this, maybe pushing 40, shirtless, beer-gutted dude with, hair that hasn't been combed.
The red in class.
Smoking a cigarette while basically riding him around the block repeatedly on, a kid's hoverboard thing. One of those things that's like a Segway, but without the arm.
Right.
And, he's just constantly, cruising around, standing straight, smoking a cigarette, shirtless, in my apartment complex.
Yeah.
And so it's interesting to see the span of what humans are capable of. We're capable of, I'm sure I've said this on here before, but I used to work at this Bog Bean in Anderson, which was a movie and used bookstore and stuff like that. And every day at 1, I'd be working and looking out the window, and I'd see this guy come riding by with a Raiders beanie on, riding what is obviously his kid's dirt bike, carrying a 40 in a paper bag at 1:30 in the afternoon. And I'm looking at him going I either made some really good decisions in my life or some really bad ones, because, what's up with that?
Yeah. Well, you say people are capable of pretty much anything in the right circumstances. That's true, but we're not, under the wrong circumstances, we're pretty much useless.
Yeah. So
it's just a matter of the environment, really.
Yeah, I had a kid when I was 24, right? Harley, our youngest. And it makes me wonder what type of person, because up until I had a kid, I was not exactly kicking ass in this world.
Sure.
I was off and on homeless, kind of whatever drugs. I was kind of, doing my thing, and nothing. I had nothing. And so I had this kid, and then all of a sudden I have to step my life up.
Right.
And this is 17 and a half years ago at this point. And I do often wonder, man, if I had not had that kid, who would I be today? You know,
be writing it, drinking 40.
Would I? I don't know. Would I have found inspiration someplace else? You know, because like having a kid, like most of my successes in life have been based mainly off of fear. You know, fear is a
like
major.
I can't let this kid die. That's
totally, man. Yeah, like I
that's
like,
where I draw the line.
I'd killed tons of fish, lost tons of pets, and then here I am, like holding a baby, and I'm just like, oh my god, what am I gonna do? You know, so like, fear,
man, I need some money. I need to get some of this dirt off the walls.
Yeah, totally. You know, I wake up one morning and she's sitting in the corner. She's like 1, and she's like chewing her tongue or something, and I'm like, what is this? And I reach in her mouth and I pull out a mosquito hawk. She's sitting in the corner of my house eating a mosquito hawk, and I'm just all like, well, man, I'm going to have to...
She's more useful than I was at
one. I got to kick up my parenting game, you know.
Or she takes care of the insects. That's good.
Yeah, so that's terrible, man. That's absolutely terrible. All right, so our guest tonight is exciting. We have Earl Grey. We're going to have to find out what's up with that name. That name is over the top.
Yeah, I have this weird feeling there's going to be some great story behind it.
There better be.
Yeah.
Unless he tells us that he's the 19th Earl of Grey.
Yeah, I don't know.
You know, there really was an Earl of Sandwich.
I know, and I love that. Yeah. That's one of my favorite facts about
sandwiches.
Reality, basically. About just life, the universe, people, everything.
Right, yeah. Totally. So Earl Grey is... Man, he's got a long title. All right, so let's bring up the title here. Earl Grey is the Assistant State Director of Southern California, a chief at MUFON, a chief field investigator, and star team at MUFON, the Mutual UFO Network. Yeah. For those of you who don't know what the Mutual UFO Network is, it's a collection of researchers who really sort of try to follow the scientific principle and collect data on UFO sightings.
Yeah.
And if you're anything like me and you're a nerd, you first heard of MUFON on the X-Files.
We don't have any nerds listening to the show, Chauncey.
Yeah. Jared raised his hand. Jared knows. Yeah.
Yeah. It would have been the X-Files for me, except I was born later. So for me, it was Fringe, but same idea.
All right. You know, I don't know. How much time do we got here? About 2 minutes. All right. You know Jake, who I work with, you used to work with, I do the Being Found show with. He was going off about
I have no memory of my former coworkers.
Yeah, I'm just making sure. Clarify. He was going off about how he's been marathoning his way through all of the X-Files.
Oh, boy.
And
is he ready to come on the show?
Yeah. But that it was a really interesting sort of timeline of the evolution of the personal computer and cell phone.
Oh, yeah.
Because as you watch each season back to back, you know, it's like in the very first season, she's like Doogie Howser, you know, she's always like writing her little thing at the end. And like it's fully like green text on a black screen, you know, and stuff. And their cell phones are huge. And in the first season, they didn't even have them at all. They got to get to a phone booth to call the main office, you know. And then he also said it was a really interesting timeline of people's glasses.
Yeah.
That glasses were like all kind of wiry and weird in the beginning, and then they got all kind of fashionable towards the end.
Well, the truth is out there in terms of glasses.
Is out there, and so is a commercial break, which is what we're coming up on to. You are listening to Radio Wasteland. When we come back, we have our guest, Earl Grey, from the Mutual UFO Network. All right, welcome back to Radio Wasteland and our guest, Earl Grey. Earl, you have a very long title. Let me cover this here. Assistant State Director, Southern California, MUFON, Chief Field Investigator, Star Team at MUFON, which is the Mutual UFO Network. Did I get everything?
Yeah, I'm also actually a member of Kathleen Martin and Denise Stoner's extraterrestrial research team now, so I guess I have to amend that on my business card elsewise.
Totally. You're going to have a business.
I'm a busy guy.
You're going to have a business card that has like another little flap that flaps down so that you can cover your big title.
Yeah.
You know, our very first guest that we ever had on this show was Deb Rooney. At the time, I'm not sure what she does now, but she was the assistant director of the Northern California MUFON, and she was our very first guest. We had like 5 shows where we were first starting out. We didn't really kind of know what we were doing, so we were just kind of winging it, and she was like our first guest, and really it was a great success, and so
that's why we have guests.
And that's why we have guests all the time now, yeah. And we're really happy to have you back on the show. But the first thing that I got to tell my audience is your name is Earl Grey, and there is no way that doesn't raise an eyebrow. How'd you get a name like Earl Grey?
Well, I'll tell you how that happened. And it does raise eyebrows sometimes. I'm a musician, and around 1989 or so, I was playing a lot of gigs out here in Los Angeles, and I happened to hang out at an old sort of a coffee house gathering place called the Iguana that was out here in the San Fernando Valley. And it was sort of a hangout spot where Don Joe from the band X would hang out. I'd wind up, opening up and sometimes even jamming a couple times with Exene Cervenka from X. And, everybody had their little musician pseudonyms.
Well, this show knows that I am a punk rock, garage rock fan, so I am definitely a fan of X, so I'm excited already.
There you go. Well, you know what I'm talking about. So, my birth name is Earl Anderson, and I was playing one club where Eric Anderson would play, and they would, sometimes our audiences would get confused. They'd come out on the wrong night. So everything kind of led me to, I sort of need a different, musician name and something more memorable. And so I was, I guess I was at this store or something. I saw a box of Earl Grey tea, of course, and I started laughing. I was like, wow. That's free advertising. I'd play a lot of acoustic gigs in coffee houses, know, and so there I am on the menu, right?
Right.
That
was
funny. 1989, and now my kids call me Earl Grey. Nobody really knows me as Earl Grey Anderson, except I kind of use that at MUFON, the full title. But Earl Grey, I don't know, it served me pretty well. I thought I haven't had any, not any real negative situations with it. I guess it could scare an experiencer or something if they thought perhaps I was a hybrid or
right.
So far.
With a name like Chauncey, I haven't gotten many nicknames throughout my life, so I'm impressed. I need to come up with a moniker.
No, Chauncey's perfect.
I know another Chauncey, actually.
Do you?
Another musician.
Well, clearly he has to die.
Right, totally.
There can only be one.
Yeah, totally. Okay, so without going into MUFON yet, really, what led you there? What was, everybody had a first experience that really got them interested in this stuff. What was your life that sort of steered you in that direction?
For myself, it happened at a very young age. My mom was Howard Hughes' personal secretary. She worked out at the Hughes Aircraft Building that was out here, on Santa Monica Boulevard in Sepulveda, I think was kind of the area where it was at. And she used to speak with him through an intercom system. At this point, he was being very reclusive. And I think my mom had originally been hired as a stenographer. She was, one of those who could do shorthand without batting an eye. Everything that she would write was in shorthand, really. Mm-hmm. So anyhow, she was working for Howard Hughes, and he started sending her out to locations to do his bidding and to also do the stenography work, I guess. So my mom started working in deep underground military labs. Now, when I was about 5 years old, she told me this story where she said, well, there's a little city under the desert that people don't know about, son. I went out there, and you go down in an elevator. Takes you way, way, way down, and the doors open up, and there's a little town, where they get around in golf carts. They had a movie theater, cafes. And this was back in the 1950s. As best as I can as I've been able to gather, it was probably around 1956 to 58 when she was going out there. So that was, one of those things where as a little kid, your parent told you something and it's kind of, I didn't really think a whole lot about it.
I don't know. It's got my imagination reeling as is, makes me think of all these great movies and stories, and man, that would fire up my imagination at that age, that's for sure.
Oh, yeah. It was the beginning of the space age. I mean, I was growing up watching the Mercury launches and all that. And later on, my mom was more or less breaking her security clearance telling me that. But, I guess that she thought that I was young enough that I would forget about it. Problem is I kept bringing it up. And I don't think it bothered her too much at first because she had retired from the business. She was trying to be a housewife. But later on, she went back into aerospace. She actually wound up being a headhunter for Lockheed Skunk Works, as well as she worked a lot for Rocketdyne out here and the Rockwell Science Center, but primarily for Lockheed. So, around the mid 70s, she really clammed up. She wouldn't talk about it at all because she was using her security clearances again. But going back when I was a kid, my mom never really talked about them in the same subject line, but my mom seemed to know an awful lot about extraterrestrial life. I mean, she would bring it up every once in a while, and she would say things like, that it was a very real phenomena, that we know about it, that UFOs, while some are hoaxes, it's actually a real thing, that you should laugh at the subject. And so I grew up hearing, about the underground lab that my mom worked in. And then I grew up hearing her talking very authoritatively about extraterrestrial life, as if it was a given, as if we knew that it was out there already. Now, it wasn't till later in my life, maybe when I had read The Day After Roswell or something. I wasn't really a UFO guy, I didn't really read the literature. I read a lot of science fiction. I was always obsessed with outer space. But then I started putting it together. It's like, so the underground labs have something to do with the extraterrestrial thing. So I started getting a little more pointed with my questions.
Right. She didn't like that.
At this point, my mom would get mad, when I would bring it up. It's just like, I can't talk about it.
Earl, let me cut you off there. I like where this is headed to, but we are coming up on our commercial break, and I don't want to miss any of it. So you are listening to Earl Grey from the Mutual UFO Network, MUFON, here on Radio Wasteland. Come on back. All right, welcome back to Radio Wasteland and our guest, Earl Grey from the Mutual UFO Network. Earl, when we left and we went to commercial, you were telling us that you had gotten to a point where you really started to get interested in aliens and UFOs beyond reading science fiction, and your mom had known something due to her work, and your questions were starting to get a little more poignant and a little more to the point. Although I think I just was a little repetitive there, but can you pick us up from there?
Sure. Well, there were a couple of, just a few instances where my mom became more transparent and started talking. And I found that if I took her to movies, I could get a little more info. And it kind of became a thing. And probably when I really hit the jackpot was I took her to see Star Wars when it first came out in 1977. And there weren't a whole lot of people in the theater. It was the first week the film had come out. I'd read about it in Time magazine and it took her, And after the film, she started talking about it. She was really excited. She was saying things like, son, Star Wars is not all that far-fetched. There really is intelligent life out there. We know about it. And she started talking a bit, and then it was like she would catch herself, and then she'd clam up. But, for some reason that film really moved her, and I got a little bit more out of her. she actually said that, yeah, we know. I mean, it's already a given in certain circles in the government and aerospace. She didn't elaborate on that, so I took her to see the movie E.T. a few years later. Well, let's see what we can hear now, you know. And the only comment she had after that film was that, well, it's a cute film, son, but I don't think they're all that nice. And that was it.
That's terrifying.
Yeah, that's worrying.
I don't like that.
And I don't know that I agree with that, you know, myself. Just in my own research as a you know, chief field investigator for MUFON, I'm finding that there's more that while some people are horrified by the ontological change that happens in their worldview and their philosophy of things, that once they get past that, I think that it was Edgar Mitchell's group, the free research group. They did many, you know, they pulled like thousands of experiencers, and 60% of them were asked the question: if you could stop being taken today, would you have it end? 60% of them said no, that it had actually been a positive in their lives.
Yeah.
That they had, you know, things like psychic abilities and empathy. And so, you know, I don't even know, you know, I think that my mom was coming from a military point of view, that you know, it's just obviously a national security threat.
Totally, a post-atomic point of view.
Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Now, my mom, towards the end of her life, through her life, she kept getting unrelated cancers. She kept getting, I mean, she must have been radiated. And we finally talked about it towards the end of her life. She was dying. She was on her deathbed. And she became more transparent again. You know, it was right around where Bill Clinton had actually said there is an Area 51, and the reason why I had to disclose that was because there was a successful lawsuit that was brought against them by a bunch of former employees who suffered health problems from whatever they had been exposed to. And so I tried to get my mom to lawyer up and to go after them. You know, it's like, you know, you've got to go to Europe. You know, I mean, my mom had this extra money coming into where she would go take a Europe trip every single year, you know, but I felt like, well, you know, nothing's worth your life. And her comment towards, you know, it was maybe 2 weeks before she actually passed away, was that she knew exactly what she had been getting into, that she was doing her patriotic duty for her country just as a soldier would do, and taking the risks of going into battle, and that she wouldn't sue anybody and she wouldn't change anything if she could. So that was that, you know. And that was all that she really disclosed to me, you know, other than that she worked in deep underground labs in the middle of the desert. She talked about, I mean, she knew people like Werner von Braun. She said that she knew him. He was a charming man, she said. You know, she would sometimes in my life, you know, she would punctuate conversations with these, you know, kind of outrageous things. But it's like, well, you know what I was working in, and I actually did know Werner. He was very charming. He called me Betty Grace. That was her first and middle name.
All right,
sort of like as a pet name.
Right. So that is absolutely amazing, and it gets you here to MUFON. For our audience, maybe you can give us a brief explanation of what MUFON is.
Well, we are the oldest the oldest UFO research group in the world. Next year will be our 50-year anniversary. We have 3,000 members, or I think it's 4,000 members worldwide. And the thing that's distinctly amazing about MUFON is that you can become a hands-on UFO researcher with a caseload. I started looking into MUFON. I knew that, you know, I became very armchair detective about the UFO phenomena after my mom passed away. That's when I started actually getting very serious about it. And MUFON offered me the chance to go out and research UFOs with, contemporary, people will, you can go to the MUFON, MUFON.com, and you can fill out a sighting report if you see a UFO. And you will get people that are knowledgeable in the phenomena and that will go out and will research your UFO for you. See if there are other corroborating witnesses that may have seen the same UFO. And it's, we use a scientific method. More or less, we use the guidelines that Dr. J. Allen Hynek set back during the Project Blue Book period back in the 1970s.
Mm-hmm.
So, or 60s and 70s. And that's the way that we research them. It's the scientific study of UFOs for the benefit of humanity is our little creed. And it really is that way.
So as a field investigator, I think the number one thing on a lot of listeners' minds who are captivated by this, have you found anything really quite amazing when you're out there doing the field investigations? Anything mind-blowing? I've
had some mind-blowing cases.
That's the best answer to that question.
That's my favorite answer.
I don't know if I just have a propensity for it or if I've just been lucky, but I've been doing this for about 3.5 years now, and I have 16 confirmed unknowns, which, an unknown is how we classify actual UFO. And we want evidence. That's the main thing. Everybody seems to have or has heard a UFO story, but we want witnesses. We want Geiger counter readings if there was a landing, or it's just like we approach it very scientifically. Mm. Even though the phenomena has fuzzy edges to it. The more I look into it, the more I think that quantum entanglement has a lot to do with how they travel, how they seem to have telepathic influence on us, the way that they can communicate with people. But I've had many experiencer cases where people have been taken or visited. Some of them, I have one guy who is a Homeland Security agent, actually a very important one locally here. And from the age 7 up to right now, he's had recurring visits from extraterrestrial entities. And this is a guy who, he's looking after our national security, in airports and such. So, I have people from all walks of life. I had another case last year that actually got picked for the book that MUFON just put out, the year's best cases. And I had 2 women in Azusa, California here, who took chase after 2 UFOs in their car. We had another witness who saw the same thing in the next town over. They saw the UFOs coming, and he saw them going. So I had a third corroborative witness on the case. And more or less, these women chased after
Earl. Mm-hmm. Let me cut you off there. We're coming up on the commercial break. We'll pick this story up when we come back. You're listening to Earl Grey here on Radio Wasteland. Come on back. All right, welcome back to Radio Wasteland and our guest Earl Grey from the Mutual UFO Network, better known as MUFON. When we went to commercial break, you were telling us about one of your experiences as a field investigator where the 2 women had seen the UFO and taken off chase after it. Guy in the town over saw the UFO coming and the women coming after it. Is that right?
The women saw it approaching, and the guy in the next town over saw them leaving. It was 2 UFOs. I guess you would call them orbs. They were these orangish red orbs about the size of a car. And they saw 2 of these that were just sort of chasing over the treetops, and they took chase after it in their car. Drove sort of a circuitous path through downtown Azusa, and finally they got caught up in a cul-de-sac near a park that's in Sousa. They watched the two orbs continue towards the, I guess it's the San Bernardino Mountains or the San Gabriel Mountains, the range that's there. And they were hovering, doing what we call the falling leaf motion, sort of going up and down, just hovering there. So they're watching this, and then there's this light behind them. They turn around, and hovering over the house that was next to the park was a full-on, well, best I can describe it, a flying saucer. It was 35 feet, approximately 35 feet across, and it looked like it had camouflage or sort of it was blinking in and out of existence as it hung there. So you would see the saucer, and then you would see it disappear for a second, but you would still see the little orbs that were under it, which seemed to, the woman thought that it was probably something to do with the propulsion system. So they watched this hanging there, and it hung there for a while, and I guess about a couple of minutes, and then it just took off. It was gone. Now, these two women were very intelligent. I grilled them and grilled them. They'd been interviewed, I guess, 3 different times, just extensively. Our state director, Jeff Krause, came out and interviewed them independent of myself. And it was a good enough case that BuzzFeed actually came out, and they did a episode on this UFO sighting. And there you go. That's kind of the end of that story.
Right.
But it was a really good and confirmed, and that was actually chosen as one of the better UFO cases of last year.
Right.
And that was my case.
Because of all the corroboration. You know, we have guests on this show, and some of them are, when it comes to aliens, it seems like some people have this idea of what they're up to and some sort of global conspiracy thing. There are these people who are mentally connected and communicating with Zeta Reticuli. And then there are these sort of nuts and bolts researchers that are all about the facts and paperwork and putting this stuff down. And so I bring this up to let our listeners know that MUFON is while the members may have their separate belief systems and thoughts, what MUFON itself is collecting is really sort of nuts and bolts facts and testimonies and very scientific, right?
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah, very much so.
And that's something I really respect about it.
We would have brought out a Geiger counter to the hover point. We would have, done soil samples, but the gentleman that owned the house was adamantly against it. I guess that he was a religious fellow, and he more or less, his whole attitude was get off my property. So
I see.
Unfortunately, we weren't able to follow it up as well as I would have liked to have, because I believe we would have, it was hovering over this old tree, and I think that we probably would have gotten material evidence. At least, a Geiger counter hit off of it.
Right.
But that's the way we do it. We're very scientific about it.
We don't have too much more time in the interview, so I want to ask you a question that I like to ask any UFO researcher, and I realize this is conjecture. It's a little contrary to what MUFON does, but I'm always curious about what the intention is of these alien visitors. Do you have any speculation, or have you come across anything that really sort of tells us the intention? Like, why are they even here? Why would they abduct people? Why be here so secretively? Do you get what I'm asking?
Yes. Well, my personal view, and it doesn't mean that this is the reality, but it's just, we, like you're saying, we all kind of course, have, what our personal thoughts on the issue. And, I think that they may be doing something about human evolution. I think that we're kind of a dangerous species, for one thing. I mean, just look at the wars, and you look how how we've had UFOs that have hovered over and even shut down missile systems. They're obviously trying to tell us something. And there are those that believe that they're trying to kick up our evolutionary, path a little quicker. before we destroy ourselves.
Right.
I mean, I kind of think of Earth as a wild animal park. I think that, you know, they come here, they tranquilize us, they track certain people, they do medical experiments, and it reminds me very much of an animal sanctuary and how the caretakers sort of treat the animal sanctuary, and maybe that's what we are.
Yeah, I was actually talking about
new hypothesis guy.
I think I was talking about this a show or two back, where basically I grew up watching nature shows, and it's not like the monkeys knew they were being videotaped and tracked, and that all the rest of us were sitting back here watching monkeys thinking how interesting it is. And that might be what you're saying, you know?
Yeah, I think that we haven't had full disclosure. I think that it may actually be our visitors that don't want us to have full disclosure. It would kind of destroy what they're doing right now.
Right, right. Well, it's amazing how some of these science fiction shows and writers, you know, end up stumbling across things that are truths and stuff like that. And one of those truths might be this Star Trek Prime Directive, where, you know, maybe we're hovering on some level where we're getting close to figuring it out for ourselves, but we're not ready for the communication, you know, where we're getting close to being there where it's undeniable. But maybe they're saying, like, no, we don't want this crazy monkey channel up in our space station, you know, for lack of a better way to put it. I mean, you know, nobody wants a rhino in their space station.
That's what you know, I think the Prime Directive might be a very real thing. That maybe Gene Roddenberry knew something. I don't know. He was old Navy, I guess, wasn't he?
Yeah, but they don't even have to know anything. I mean, human imagination, you know, I think a big part of the problem is that human imagination, you know, ends up creating these science fiction shows, and then when people start to propose it as a real thing, people go, oh, well, Gene Roddenberry already came up with that. And you can say, well, yeah, he was smart. He came up with a totally plausible answer. That doesn't mean that the answer is not true. You know, I find that anything that has been made into something fiction, if you bring it up as a possible real thing, people kind of automatically kind of scoff at it a little bit.
Yeah. No, there is that. And of course, the phenomena has had a ridicule factor from, you know, day one. But there's obviously a lot of people in the government that take it very, very seriously. We're seeing the release of some of these videos from, you know, the To the Stars group now that were, you know, the Nimitz affair that happened in 2004 apparently was a real thing. You know, there's still some question marks around the details of it, but, you know, it was certainly real enough that they sent up a bunch of F-18s to you know, go after it. And, yeah, that's, you know, it's very serious, you know, taken very seriously in the government and in the military. But there's the scoff factor that happens out here. And it's still there to a certain extent, but it isn't as bad as it used to be. I mean, now it's kind of cool if you see a UFO. and that's the problem, you know. I mean, 95% of what I have to do for MUFON is tell people why what they saw wasn't a UFO, you know, because everybody wants to see one now. And there's a lot of drones and a lot of Chinese lanterns and, you know, Mars has been really bright lately. And then we've got Elon Musk shooting stuff up from Vandenberg over here.
Right.
I think we had 18 different UFO reports on the Dragon 9 ship that he sent up last year. I had to close about half of those myself. It was about an hour's worth of paperwork for each one. But there you go.
Right.
It's worth it when you get to the real UFO.
Well, I'm really a prime example of this. You know, I have never seen a UFO. I have never had a paranormal experience. I just have talked to enough people who have that I find it incredibly interesting, and I want to know more, you know. We're coming up on the end of the show here. Can you tell our audience a little bit more about how they can find out about you and how they can find out about MUFON?
Certainly. Well, we have Los Angeles MUFON.com or MUFONLosAngeles.com, which is our local group here. I encourage everybody to go to MUFON.com, the main website for our organization. You can become a member, or if you so desire, we need field investigators. We have a lot of UFO sightings here in Southern California, and I'll put you to work. I mean, you'll be mentored, and we'll put you to work. And you can do that by going to MUFON.com and just click on how to become a field investigator. That's what I did, and it was one of the best decisions I've ever made in my life.
All right. Well, thank you very much for being on the show. Love to have you. Love to have you on again. I can totally tell that we could have gone on through a couple more. We probably could have spent the entire show on your one investigation because, you know, there's a lot there, you know. I mean, obviously it's an investigation. If it warrants an hour's worth of paperwork, I'm sure it warrants an hour's worth of conversation. All right, you've been listening to Earl Grey here on Radio Wasteland. Thanks for checking us out. All right, welcome back to Radio Wasteland. We've been listening to our guest, Earl Grey of the Mutual UFO Network. I'm not going into that whole title. You can research him online. Look up MUFON.com, MUFON from Southern California, and you can see his extensive title, Earl Grey Esquire.
Then head on over to his Facebook, look through his pictures, maybe make a shrine.
Totally, yeah. So what'd you think of that guest?
That was totally interesting.
It was interesting. You know, I felt that we could do a whole show on his mom.
Yeah, you know, we always ask that first question, you know, how'd you get into this?
Yeah.
And it's an important question, but it almost never yields that kind of fruit. It was like, well, I had a mom who, you know, probably brought food to E.T. or something.
Right, totally. Yeah. Yeah. Brought the Reese's Pieces. Although she did say that the E.T. was a little too nice of a kid's movie for the reality.
Yeah, well, you know, like the crusts cut off at sandwiches. It was a real jerk.
Yeah, totally. Crust cut off that E.T. sandwich.
Exactly.
Yeah. But yeah, I really enjoy these, I say it all the time, these nuts and bolts guys. You know,
yeah.
Because there's some reality there. You know, the other ones get my imagination running.
Mm-hmm.
And I like my imagination running.
Right.
But I like to have something to anchor it to. And, you know, I feel that MUFON's done a pretty good job at creating this, taking these people, and you know all these people have their own different views of what is beyond, but they're all sort of tying themselves to...
I think it would be really hard to be a UFO investigator and not have some kind of idea.
Yeah, well...
And to really just be like the official line is, we're just collecting data, we don't know. But that's not how people work, right? As people, you know, we collect data, and we've got to come to some kind of conclusion with the data that we have, otherwise we go crazy.
And, you know, I asked him the question that I asked so many, and that is the intention. And he hit us with one of the same ones that a lot of people have been hitting us here lately, is that we're an intergalactic zoo.
Yeah.
Personally, I don't like that. I don't like it. Don't get me wrong, I'm not coming down on him or any of the other people who put it out there, but I don't find that intention to be
that compelling. Yeah,
that compelling. I don't.
Yeah,
you know, the intergalactic Jersey Shore. I don't think that's it. You know.
No, I think they could. You know, aliens could probably get their kicks elsewhere. But...
Right. Although we didn't necessarily like. The reality of the one guest, and I'll just leave his name out of it, but the concept of what he was saying was that future humans were actually coming back. I found that to be a little more plausible. That makes a lot of sense to me, actually. You know, instead of an intergalactic zoo, more of an archaeological dig into their own history because there are lost parts.
Right.
You know, that makes a lot of sense
to me. I don't want to believe in time travel unless there's some crazy compelling evidence. Right. Now, we did talk to... Oh, gosh, I forget his name. But, you know, we went into time travel with that one guest, and he did have some really interesting... Rob Shelsky, yes, thank you. Yeah, he did have some very interesting evidence. I don't know if it's quite enough for me right now, but, you know, in most situations, if we're being visited by UFOs, you know, that they would have faster than light travel, which means they have time travel, or they don't. But if they don't have faster than light travel, that means, you know, they've come here from their own planet, and, you know, they've either come in, like, some form of stasis, or they've just moved so fast through space that, you know, time hasn't really passed very much for them.
What about like wormholes? Does that mean that they travel through time, or could I mean
a wormhole could take you through time if it could get you somewhere faster than the speed of light? It can also take you through time.
What about like folding space?
Same thing.
What about
if you can outrun, if you can beat a ray of light to its destination in any way, then that enables you to mess up cause and effect.
Yeah, that's true. I don't know. My mind's blown.
So, now, relativity states that, the closer you go to the speed of light, the less time passes for you relative to the rest of the universe. So, in theory, if you could generate enough energy, you could go from here to the other end of the galaxy in like a week.
Right.
For you. For the rest of the galaxy, it would take, however many millions of years light takes to cross the galaxy.
Right.
So if aliens came from here to there, maybe it only took them a week, but they can't go back because they are now 1 million years ahead in the calendar of wherever they came from.
Right.
Except, not a million years, like 100 million years, something crazy.
Hence my issue with the zoo.
People don't exactly.
And
you don't come just to, hang out, look. Right. You don't leave behind your old civilization just to come and hang out and look around.
Like I would turn to my wife and I'd be all, "Hey, do you want to go to the zoo?" And she'd be all, "No, I do not." Because we have kids and family here.
Right.
And I would like to stay with them.
Once you go to the zoo, you can never go home.
Right. You get to the zoo and you're all, "That is an amazing woodchuck. Now what?"
Right.
Right. Yeah. Totally.
And now everyone I ever knew is dead.
Right. And plus, when I got there,
except for the people who were in the car with me.
Right. And plus, when I got there, that woodchuck had evolved into a human.
Exactly.
Because that much time had passed.
Right.
Right. All right. So, people out there, what do you think? Are we an intergalactic zoo? Is this universal Jersey Shore, or what? You're listening to Radio
My money's
Wasteland.
on what?
You're listening to what? All right. No, wait. Your money's on what? You're listening to Radio Wasteland. All right, welcome back to Radio Wasteland. Sean, you got some news for us here?
I sure do.
Oh.
So, that elections are coming up in November.
Yeah, the
so
Russians
there's a lot
are tweaking them.
Oh, sure, yeah.
Is that not your news?
That's not my news. That is in the news. We can take that to be a given. That our next leader in whatever district will be Oleg.
Yeah, well, on all my social media, anytime I see somebody say something like shady or rude or something, I'm just all, is that a Russian bot?
Yeah.
Yeah. All right.
Yeah.
But what's your
paranoid
news?
Now. No, my actual news, in the vein of potential congressional candidates believing weird things,
oh God,
is a woman running in the Republican primary for a House seat in not state House, but like national House,
right,
but not Senate. Running for a House seat in Florida, specifically in the Miami area,
okay,
has stated, "My alien abduction does not define me." So she was abducted, says she, when she was 7 or so. And years ago, before she ran, she talked about it on a program actually very much like this. And so apparently they still communicate psychically with her. They were Nordic-type aliens, which apparently is a thing.
Right.
They were tall and majestic with long blonde hair.
Right.
And
sexy aliens.
Right. And they explained to her all sorts of truths about, what particular landmarks in Florida may or may not be ancient pyramids left behind by aliens, and, whether God exists and all this information. So she shared this, but she wants everyone to, discount that when they're choosing who to vote for, because at the bottom line, she has the experience, regardless of her psychic connection to the Nordic aliens.
Yeah, I don't know about that. For one, I gotta say, why is it that every time there's somebody running for office that's absolutely crazy. They're running as Republicans.
I knew you were going to say that.
I'm really center of center. I'm trying not to pick a side. I think both sides are crazy, but we're gonna have to do some research and get some crazy Democrats.
So I thought
here.
The same thing, and I did some research, and really, it is about half of people in the U.S. who believe in something weird: ghosts, Bigfoot, aliens, whatever. Of that half, estimates vary on. Of that half, most of the people who do believe it are Democrats compared to Republicans.
Yeah,
although the number
surprised.
of independents is very high, of course. But of course, there are a lot more Democrats, and studies have just varied on, do Democrats or Republicans believe more weird things? And really, it seems like it's a toss-up.
Right.
So as far as Republican, GOP candidates who believe weird things, well, there have been 2 in the news recently.
Right.
But I thought the same thing. But I do honestly think, maybe it's just a coincidence in this case.
Yeah, and plus we're living in this post-Alex Jones world, and
right.
So a lot of
now,
that
Alex
stuff...
Jones is definitely, hard right-wing.
Right, but, we also have these sort of, these conspiracies that are hitting the news that people are believing on a political level. It's like Pizzagate. It's like...
Exactly.
As soon as I heard Pizzagate, I'm just all like, no.
Yeah, I definitely think the right wing in the last few years does kind of have some issues with political conspiracy theories.
Yeah,
basically. Yeah. But the shoe was on the other foot when Bush was in office.
Yeah, I guess so. So last night,
there were lots of left-leaning political conspiracies about this or that horrible thing.
Right,
the government
9/11, and we're involved, and
exactly, and that was mostly
steel doesn't melt when you put this sort of stuff on it.
Right, jet fuel doesn't melt steel beams. Is the meme that it has become.
So last night, I'm having some drinks and I'm playing croquet. I was just waiting for you to make fun of me for that one.
No, sorry.
I'm playing with my buddy Sean.
So you're doing white people stuff. That's cool.
Right. Yeah. So I'm in the middle of doing white people stuff last night. And my buddy Sean, who's very liberal, I'm talking to him about the Bigfoot erotica.
Sure.
And he thinks it's hilariously funny because he's kind of into this conspiracy stuff too, And,
right.
And I told him, I'm just, okay, so you're real progressive left. So let's say you had the perfect candidate that you totally believed in, totally backed, and were totally down with.
Mm-hmm.
But he also wrote Bigfoot erotica. Would that be a deal breaker for you? And less than a second went by and he said, yes, absolutely.
Oh, that's weird.
Yeah. So Bigfoot erotica is a no-go for Sean when it comes for running for office, regardless of what side you're on.
For me,
Sean.
Me, it wouldn't be really.
SHAUN.
Yeah. And the Miami Herald endorsed this candidate. And they said, quote, she is an unusual candidate, but went on to say that, you can't discount her significant experience and success and all the various things she's done just on the basis of her weird personal beliefs.
All right. Well,
which I would tend to agree with. I don't even know if I'd like this candidate. I'm not there. I haven't researched her. I don't know if she's any good. I probably wouldn't vote for a Republican. But for me, if I like the candidate, an alien abduction experience would not be a deal breaker.
Yeah, I don't know. How do you know if you're getting her opinion or Klaatu's?
Well, here's my thing. I think it's no different than having sincerely held religious beliefs that are a little weird.
I think it's no different than having sincerely held religious beliefs at all.
Yeah. Well, a lot of people, they have, quote, sincerely held religious beliefs, but it's kind of like God just wants me to do whatever the prevailing sentiment of society is that I should do anyway.
I don't know if those are sincerely held. The sincerely held ones have a personal relationship with Jesus Christ. And
I
stuff
guess.
It gets a little...
Yeah, well, see...
he's either talking to you or you're crazy.
That would bother me just as much. That would... either way, if it's aliens or Jesus Christ that you have a personal relationship with, it's like, okay... I still want you for office. Don't
Right. And
don't get me wrong. It kind of does make me go,
My
but it still won't be a
wife
deal
is
breaker.
Christian. I love her to death, and she either knows something I don't, or she's like batshit crazy.
Sure,
one or the other.
But see, I think there's, there are degrees, right? There are degrees of how much people are into this. There are, I legitimately hear Jesus's voice in my head every morning when I wake up.
Wait, what?
Like, that's one degree. And then there's, I have this set of beliefs which, happens to align with the Bible. And, maybe you take it in a completely metaphorical sense. That's another degree. People are on the spectrum.
Yeah. I think it's really just not fair of us because both of us are on the outside of this.
Exactly.
I just don't understand it. All I care is that people are good people and if they're out there doing their best. So really, now that I say that out loud.
Well, I'd apply the same logic to Bigfoot erotica or alien abductions.
Or alien mental communication with the Nordics from Zeta Reticuli. All right. So, question to you. Is that a deal breaker? You're listening to Radio Wasteland. Thanks for checking us out.